Themes that we found in the poetry, there are 4 major themes: family and friendship, being trapped, controlling your own destiny, and then finally this idea of hiding your true self. In this poem, you see a student compare her friends to waves, and they really hold her up, and that friendship is what gets her through for these forces that she doesn't understand. You also see her using, the pictures of the waves and the holding hands to really bring together. So you see how she used the picture to kind of grab the essence of her poetry. This is a great poem. Student compared her family to a garden, and each person in her family took on a different characteristic depending on their personality, and I think that helped her see that she, as the wild flower, needed them all to survive, and that without any of them, the garden wouldn't be together. And she talked about using this picture because families aren't a perfect picture. They're a little bit messy, and that they change. So she liked the idea that her picture that she chose wasn't, just a photograph of a perfect garden, that it was, the images were blurred. She really connected to that idea and thought that connected with her family. Another common theme was being trapped in routine. These kids, it's high school. Life's driven by a bell, by an alarm in the morning, by getting to class by 8:12, and then your next class by 9:03. So this is a very common theme. This student, who used the idea of black and white contrast very well in their design, talked about being a snow globe almost that was trapped on a mantle and wanted nothing more to be shattered, to get this sense of freedom almost. It's a very good poem, and a lot of these poems, I think this one included, are loaded on the name. This poem I like. The student talked about their life being structured and choreographed, and really compared this idea that maybe I just want to improvise, maybe I want to try freeform dance, and not just have every bit of my life planned out for me. This was a very common theme across all these poems of fighting against this idea that destiny was controlled by other forces, and that these students couldn't really grasp that idea of freedom. And it was like it was just out of reach, that ability to just be free. It was a theme found throughout a lot of these poems. This student was issued about controlling his own destiny, being speed, and being in charge. He's also a cross-country runner, so you see some intertextual links to his own personal life with speed and being a shoe, but moving through the mud. But there's, in contrast to those last poems, which is about being stuck, these with more being free and being in charge versus having your destiny controlled, you can see a very deep contrast between the two. Here he was a student who rides on top of the uncertainty as a surfboard. He takes those waves, so when uncertainty hits, he takes it. You also notice how he uses different color fonts to deal with the colors in the pictures, or it might even be to bring more meaning to whether the tide is high or low, that no matter what, you can get through it if you ride the wave. Another common point that I noticed, just giving these a quick overview, are the students' use of design elements. They do enjoy using symbols to make meaning. They did a good job with this project, but they also need a lot of support in the classroom. Students, basically, graphic design needs to become a part of our composition curriculum. Students were able to manipulate these images, fonts, and colors in space. They realized where they placed the poem, in the colors they chose, maybe the picture they chose. That influenced the meaning in their poem. They got that. And they fooled around and they mucked around and they had a lot of fun with that. They also used the symbols to often reflect their identity, like, for example, in the poem with the cross-country runner or the dancer. So the symbols that they chose not only drew on their poem, but it also reinforced their sense of identity. And finally, the students struggle, like I said, with elements of design and need support. Here you see a great poem. The student's a gamer. Anyone who sees the numbers for letters would probably recognize that. But if you're not part of what G labeled as affinity affinity groups and his affinity space where those gamers meet, you wouldn't recognize that. But this poem called My Mind, I'll just read the first verse. What do I think? Why do I worry? Why do I fight? What I think. I am what I say, when I think, when I dream. And the student commented about using this idea of the universe because it was just an open nothingness in potential, but also an open nothingness in decay. And that this idea of using a universe helped him with the idea of being in the unknown, that his mind was a big universe. So you see how he draws on his personal life in the choices he made with the symbols and then the text that he used. I think this is a great idea of how the student used color of her text so it did not detract away from the meaning based on her picture. You see a lot of different color shifts. The picture from top to bottom goes from light to dark, almost like a gradient. And what the student did is had the text do the opposite. It went from dark to light. So you have these two contrasting ideas. So what the student did was it allowed so that the text choice didn't detract away from the meaning, because she used choices in color of text to really support her ideas. Now, this is an example of a student who, even though the poem got cut off, used the idea of the lantern, where the symbol was the central theme to his poem. He found the symbol first and then worked backwards from that for the poem. I wish it wasn't cut off because it's a great poem. And you see this idea of white and dark, that negative space versus dark space, and the white lettering against the dark background. You also see within the poem different symbolic meanings using different textual elements, like with the and the of and the parentheses. So he has fun with different textual symbols. Now, here's a poem where I hate to criticize because it's the work of the author, and they are trying to capture this essence of just spontaneity and creativity, and that there's this alternative dimensions. But there's an idea that sometimes the noisiness of it all may take away or detract from the meaning. Of course, the author might argue, and some of the audience might argue, that it adds to the meaning. But you see this idea of color choice not working with the design choices per se, and that maybe if he increased the transparency of the picture, or used a different text color, or added a text box that allowed it to stand out, that would be an easier poem to read. Especially in the line, creating abstractness unimaginable, rat-a-tat-tat, thump, thump, thump. It's hard to read, and that can sometimes take away from meaning. So, across both these projects, what conclusions have I drawn myself? Mainly that poetry provides an opening to teach 21st century skills. You can use some of the oldest texts in the world to teach with the newest texts. It's actually a great connection. And also, poetry allowed students to use their little D discourse to play in the big D discourse sandbox. They got to understand, who am I? What am I doing here? So it provides a link that I'm not sure other literature can. And identity may be malleable in these younger grades, and it's not, it's not like personality, which is, some would say is stuck. But these kids try on new identities, and it's something we should explore in our ELA classrooms. And finally, and once again, there is a need to focus on design elements in the composition class. I hope you can see how students can use poetry in the 21st century to really explore their own identity and get a sense of who they are as a person, and also the challenges that they face as they try to use images to make meaning and images to respond to authorship. I will be on the Ning throughout the day, so if you want to leave me comments or have questions, please just drop a line using either the discussion board or the chat feature. And I'm now going to pass it off to Ian, who's going to act as a discussant to kind of summarize both the work that Sue and I have done.